We are so excited to start our 2025 event season with National Book Award and Pulitzer Prize finalist Adam Haslett, a writer of great emotional intelligence with keen insight into the dynamics of human relations. He'll be discussing his latest book, Mothers and Sons, with fellow Pulitzer finalist Adam Rapp, the author of Red Light Winter. Welcome, Adams.
Hello, good evening.
He's Adam Haslett. Haslett.
Yes.
I'm Adam Rapp.
So I'm going to start by reading first, and then we're going to converse. So thank you for being here to do this, and thank you all for coming. I just want to say there are a lot of people here tonight who supported me through the writing of this book and through the bringing into the world of the book, and I'm very, very grateful. I'm very lucky for the amount of support I've had in doing this, so thank you to all of those people. I am going to read just two brief sections, one from Peter's, the immigration lawyer's point of view, and then one from Anne, the mother's point of view. So there's not a lot of, these are early in the book, so there's not a lot to say. The section I'm going to read from Peter, he's been in court, and then he's just had a staff meeting back at his the immigration nonprofit where he works. And so this is a scene with him and one of his colleagues, Monica, who's another attorney. And then I'll read a section from Anne. So this takes place in a townhouse where the garden office, the garden of this townhouse garden floor has been turned into an office. This is where it takes place. Back in my office, I open my laptop, click on the client folder, and a blizzard of new messages fill the screen. When I began the job, I replied to the emails of the people I represented the day I received them, but that was a long time ago. Now the task at hand is just the task at hand, and this afternoon, that's the Rajal application on which I am behind. The documentation I have for conditions in Nepal is from an old case and needs updating. Gurvesh and a group of other boys were kidnapped by the Maoists when he was 18 during the Civil War. They were trying to recruit him, but also wanted him to be their soccer coach. Neither of these qualify him for asylum. But when his captors found out that he belonged to the Nepal Student Union, they let the others go and kept him, so he's got a political claim. The Civil War is over, which doesn't help, but the Maoists are still in power, which does. I read State Department reports, NGO reports, newspaper articles, expert witness testimony, scraped from filings and other cases, anything I can vacuum up off the internet before having to email experts myself and begin the process of cajoling and bargaining and scheduling them. Monica is the only one still there when I take a break around 8 o'clock. I ask her if she wants barbecue again, and she says yes, so I order it, and when it arrives, I eat mine standing in her office doorway. What's this about you going out next week, anyway? I ask. I'm going on vacation. That's funny, I say. No, I'm serious. That's why I'm out next week. I'm going to Vermont. I want to learn how to ski. You're going skiing? Why, you don't think a brown woman can be into that? No, I just don't believe you're into it. Did you get a Groupon or something? Fuck you, she says. For a moment, I picture Monica in a rental car on her way to some ski resort, driving up the hillside past my mother's retreat center, but then I doubt that she will get that far north. After 10 years of working with her, what I know of Monica's life outside the job is that there isn't a great deal of it. She lives in a rent-stabilized apartment in the West 90s with her mother, whom she brought over from Nicaragua after Phoebe helped her through college and law school. Her father was disappeared by the Somoza regime during the revolution. Once on a winter evening in the car as we were on our way back from detention, she told me, apropos of nothing, that for a long time she'd hated her father for what his idealism had cost their family, but eventually she'd understood. She'd never meant to be an immigration lawyer. It was just a start after law school in the office of the nonprofit that had helped her. What she meant to do was get a corporate job and buy a house in Jersey where her mother could have a garden and grow vegetables. But that was 20 years ago now, and here she still is. I don't see you taking any vacation, she says, which is true, I don't. But at least you'll be here to cover the Albanian, she says. Now that Phoebe forced you to. I take every other Nicaraguan who knocks on the door, but you're the gay one and you leave all the gays to me and Phoebe. No, I had Asfan Ravani. I took that one all the way to appeal. The Belush woman? That was a political claim. She was incidentally lesbian. You didn't even argue it. Are you giving me this person's phone sheet or not, I ask. She looks across the stack of files on the floor beside her desk, finds what she's after, and holds it out to me. Here you go, she says. I tried to reschedule, but he didn't answer. Monica stays till 9, and I leave a few minutes later. Out on King Street, through the parlor windows of Phoebe's townhouse, I see her husband, Jack, in the comfortable amber light of the wood-paneled living room, stirring a drink at the sideboard. A tax partner, now retired from Davis Polk, past chair of the Bar Committee on Professional Ethics, the old epitome of trusted counsel to major concerns. He wears cardigans and collects Art Deco clocks. If Phoebe's fundraising now and then runs short, Jack is always there, proud sponsor of his wife's good works. I get a seat on the train and scroll through news. Gaddafi's forces bomb Misrata. Obama signs bill preventing government shutdown. Heroin distribution network raided until we reach High Street Brooklyn Bridge. On the stairs up to Cabin Plaza, I consider calling my sister back, but text Cliff instead. By the time I reach my lobby, he's texted to say, sure, he'll come by in an hour, which gives me a chance to pull a few more quotes for the Nepal synopsis. He arrives with 3 beers in a canvas bag and offers me one. White, 30, Nebraskan, a web designer of some kind. It's been 3 months now that he's been coming over like this once or twice a week. I close my laptop for the day and join him at the other end of the couch. How's that deranged schnauzer, he asks. The woman in the apartment next to mine at the end of the hall is unwell and treats her animal poorly. It whimpers and barks all hours of the day and night. She's an owner and I'm a renter, and the noise isn't as bad for the others on the floor, and they are scared of the woman, so don't want to get involved. I guess it's fine, I say. I haven't noticed it tonight. He takes his shoes off and swings his legs up, then touches the balls of his feet to my thigh. You look tired, he says. Thanks. I didn't say you looked bad, he says, grinning. I like you in a shirt and tie. He's found a song, an Elliott Smith ballad, and sets his phone down on its chest, pointing the little speaker in my direction. I close my eyes and rest my hand on his chin, on his shin. It's wrong to call him innocent. He's been in the city a while, getting by. But when he's here, he acts it, as if he's a wide-eyed ingenue, and I, 10 years older, am somehow impressive. I don't know if he has a real boyfriend or not, though I doubt it. In any case, it's not something we've discussed. You could tell me things, he says, like about the work you do. I've told you about my job, I say. No, actually, you haven't. When I make no reply, he takes another swig of beer and says, but it's okay, you can be a mystery. He prefers the light on in the bedroom, but doesn't object when I turn it off. Once, on a weekend, he slept over, but it's a Tuesday. And when we're done, he doesn't ask. He just dresses and checks his phone. By the time I say goodnight to him at the door, the dog down the hall has begun to bark. So that's a little bit of Peter. I almost think like, I almost feel like we should talk, and then I'll read, rather than, Yeah.
Okay, full disclosure, we had lunch yesterday, and we share an editor, Ben George, and he had told me about Adam's work. He's one of the greatest editors in any hemisphere. Truly, truly special editor, and I'm can only say amazing things. And he had given me Imagine Me Gone a couple years ago when he visited me up at my house in Bearsville, and I kind of let it sit on a pile of books for months and months and months, and then it became a year, and then it became a year and a half, and I'm actually halfway through it right now, and it's extraordinary. And I read this in about 4 sittings 2 weeks ago. I couldn't put it down, and I feel so stupid that I didn't spend the time earlier to, like, when I read authors, I try to read like the feast of their work. It's something, I'm a nerd, and I just dive so deep into it. And now I'm a nerd for your work. It was amazing to meet you yesterday, and we had a nice long talk, and we both had pasta and ate salads. And you just read the Peter section.
Yeah.
He's such a fascinating character to me because here is an immigration lawyer who essentially works what I believe is a non-for-profit. This group that helps these lawyers that help people get their immigration status or deal with the courts. And in that pursuit, he's so passionate and he's so fastidious and he's so connected to these broken families that are being pulled apart by the system. And yet in his own life, he has this tremendous gulf with his mother. He's somewhat connected to his sister Liz. He's kind of governed by a kind of loneliness that many of us probably relate to all too well in New York City as professionals. And I found that dichotomy to be like part of the narrative force of the book, like just the psychological profile of that. Can you speak to the creation of Peter and where it all came from?
Sure. Yes. So I think I can and will. I started this book in 2019, and I had a decision when I started writing whether it was going to be Trump was going to be in the book or not, because I'm writing about the immigration system. So it seems like in this moment we're in, I'm glad we're all here reading a novel, but or talking. We're maybe not all reading a novel. But I'm glad we're here talking about my novel. But we're also obviously in a city in the country where kids are afraid to go to school and people are losing their livelihoods because they are afraid to go to their jobs. I just I can't really talk about it all now as if, it's like the sort of domain of art that lives over here. I will just say I have been thinking about, and a lot of us are thinking about what can you do? What can we do at the moment? I'll just say for informational purposes that I've been sharing with people, there's a website called readytostay.org, which is a coalition of immigration groups that is providing a lot of information about legal updates and also connecting people to legal services. And also Immigration Equality there are lawyers that specifically do work on LGBTQ claims for asylum, and they were very helpful to me when I was working on this book. So I went to law school a long time ago, but I've never written about a lawyer. And so when I started writing this book, I had this sense that I wanted to write about, like you're saying, an urban professional. And that sort of someone who was, I knew there was an emotional split in him. And a lot of friends of mine are lawyers. And a lot of people who work in these fields, they have intense relationships to clients, and they're having to do something in a way informally or emotionally, I should say, not all that different than a priest or a therapist, in as much as they're having to take in or try to take in what this person's gone through, but at the same time, the story has to be shaped, and it's on this timetable, and the consequences of it are whether or not they're going to be deported. But I knew that he was, in a way, not very much in touch with himself while he was doing this work. So we talked about this yesterday a bit, is that I was trying to occupy the mind of someone who was sort of split down the middle. And what I'm always doing when I'm writing a character is trying to find the rhythm of the language that's going to capture some part of that, like the music inside your head. What does your internal monologue sound like, so that the sentences are delivering you into something more than just the plot, but into the rhythm of that person's life. And I really kind of discovered this isn't a courtroom scene, but there are a number of courtroom scenes, and they're so his sections, they're first person, they're present tense, and they tend to be more kind of clipped and fast and not a lot of depth of because that's in a sense where he is. As
Yeah,
a
you
person.
feel like it's all right in front of you, and it's metabolized so quickly through his thought, which I loved. You feel like you're in the car with him, which is great. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, the creating of him was finding his profession. And then I had years and years ago, because a number of my friends from law school went into immigration law, so I just heard a lot about it from their own experience. So years ago, I volunteered at a detention facility doing some stuff on intake. And then once I knew I was writing a book, which was years later, I sat in on a lot of immigration court. You know, they're open to the public. Nobody goes, but there they are. And that's where you kind of learn just how the system is running through. And the thing about it is that there's people's lives, it's like a meat machine. You know what I mean? They're running through these people's stories like it's the DMV.
Right.
That's one of the things that struck me.
You know, it's, I love the dichotomy. I love I really enjoyed, like, he goes home and Cliff comes over and it feels somewhat transactional. You know, it feels like he's not necessarily in love with Cliff, or he's far from allowing himself to feel anything with Cliff.
Yeah.
And that it's over, it's a pound of flesh, if you want to call it that, and then he goes on to his life and he digs in the next day for hours and hours and hours. And I just love these kind of characters that are, it's easy to say flawed, but it's more interesting to say, I don't know, so complex, you know, in that way. Like they don't have, their blind spots are not visible to themselves, and that's why they're blind spots. I mean, it brings me to the mother character. I think if you would read after we talk about Anne a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to spoil the book for anyone who hasn't read it, but the gulf, and the big gulf, the emotional gulf, is between Peter and his mother Anne. They haven't spoken in years. I'm not going to give away why or the inciting incident that drives so much of the book, but it's felt for a long time, her absence, and it's referred to by his sister Liz, and you feel this kind of cloud between them. It's almost this atomic cloud that keeps growing and growing. And eventually you start to feel like, is the inevitable force going to drive them together in some way? And it's a very satisfying thing to read that. But my question about Anne is, you know, a Methodist minister, is that correct? Is she
Episcopal. Former Episcopal.
Former Episcopal minister, was married to a man, has fallen in love with a woman, and started a kind of a women's center up in Vermont. I don't want to use the word cult. But can you talk about her birth for you out of your brain?
Yeah. Well, so full disclosure, this character is the biographical sketch, as it were, what you just described, is based on the mother of a very good dear friend of mine who is here somewhere. So that was actually like, I had to kind of ask permission. Sometimes you have to give yourself permission to write about something that's autobiographical. In this case, I felt, so we had conversations about it, and she was super understanding and was like, yeah, go for it. Another person I'm thankful to. So I think, and so it's somebody that as I say, in the scaffolding, the emotional interior life was something I was, inventing. And I tried writing the book. I thought this was going to be a short book. I thought, oh, it won't take me long. It'll be short. That didn't work. I mean, it's not a long book, but it's like the length of, most of my other two books, my other two novels. And so I tried writing the whole book from Peter's point of view. And the trouble was that the scenes with Peter were just, with Anne, with his mother, they were just, sort of rough and awkward, because there was just too much of Anne that I couldn't get at from Peter's blinkered point of view. So it was probably a couple of years into the process that I was like, okay, I'm just going to give myself and I'm going to allow myself to write from her point of view. And then she just sort of opened up as a character. I'll just read a bit of hers.
That'd be great.
Because the other thing, I mean, as I was saying before, the kind of, what I'm trying to do always, as I say, is find the rhythm. So her rhythm is quite different than his. And now I just have to find where I meant to read from. Okay. Sorry. This is what you're supposed to do ahead of time. And I thought that I had. Where is it?
There's a dog-eared page.
There's a dog-eared page. Thank you. I rely on.
I didn't.
I
do
rely
that.
on.
I didn't
you
do
to do that. Yeah. Okay, so this is the first scene with Anne. I'm skipping a little bit, but it basically sets up the things that Adam described. As she headed up the slope, the only sound in this stillness was her boots crunching against the granulated snow. She reached the meadow and entered onto the path. All around her, the high stalks lay flat. There was no mist up here, just the brightening light of dawn, picking out the beads of moisture on the cone tips of the dead grass. In the cluster of Scotch pines at the edge of the woods, the air grew dim again, then brightened once more in the clearing. The studio was a small shingled structure, gable-roofed, with a short metal chimney in the middle and sash windows either side of a narrow, dark green door. A gift from Claire is how Anne thought of it, though it wasn't only that. For years, Anne had meditated each morning and evening in her guest room, until 7 or 8 years ago, Claire had taken it upon herself to raise the money and organize the donated labor of the center's friends to put up this little building in the woods, a place for an even deeper quiet. Others used it, of course, Claire or Roberta occasionally, guests quite regularly, but every morning at this hour and every evening after supper, now and then for a week at a time, it was Anne's alone. Once the fire was going in the stove, the chill in the room receded. She knelt and tucked her low bench beneath her thighs, keeping her jacket on, then opened the little wooden box on the table beside her and took out the index card on top of the pile, one of the 100 she'd written quotations and notes to herself on over the years and added to still. Reminders, really, callbacks to the insights she spent her days forgetting. We must be saved from immersion in the sea of lies and passions which is called the world. And we must be saved above all from that abyss of confusion and absurdity which is our own worldly self. The person must be saved from the individual. Thomas Merton. An old one, clear back to divinity school, faded ink on brittle card. Oh, the self-seriousness of it, the male absolutism, the Catholic disdain for the fallen world of the everyday. And yet, the truth in it too. Persons must be saved from individualism, the capacity for experience rescued from the fear of vulnerability. Merton, her first guide on the long road out of the organized church. She let the muscles of her throat slacken, and as she did this, her head floated slightly back and up, coming to rest with more ease atop her spine. The little discomforts, the ache along the rim of her hip, the tightness between her shoulder blades, never vanished, but the need to fix them had diminished over time. She started to sense her breath in her belly, and the gentle repetition of the widening and narrowing of her ribs that went along with it, and the joints of her collarbones as the air reached the top of her torso. And as she noticed all of this, a stream of association set off by the Merton quote floated past her inner eye. The arched entrance of Episcopal Divinity School, walking on Cambridge Common in full sun, the 4-story brick building on Garden Street, where she'd shared a top-floor apartment full of library books and houseplants, a row of brass mail slots in the lobby, where she'd turned the key to find another admiring, even worshipful letter from her then-boyfriend Richard, the man she would soon marry, father of her children. The ache in her hip asserted itself again, followed by the blistering of a log on the stove, the fact she'd forgotten once more to order wood, that Claire would sigh at her for this oversight, on and on, the ordinary noticing of the unstill mind. We're like movie projectors, one of her meditation teachers had said, loaded with an endless reel of film, and our minds are the bulbs that light the frames. Get some popcorn, take a seat. The movie has no plot. Eventually it will bore you. Then maybe you can begin. The stream began to slow. Thoughts still occurred, but took up no more space than the sunlight visible now on the floorboards or the dust floating in it. Her mind settled. And soon feeling arose, as it often did, given room. This morning it was sadness, a warm, objectless softening that she sensed throughout her body ceasing then to be a collection of isolated complaints, becoming whole. She welcomed this. And right away, too, she wanted to hold on to it, like a dreamer grabbing at the memory of her dream. It was a state that seemed so much truer than her thoughts, deeper and more resonant, a kind of accession to meaning, not of anything in particular, just meaning as such. And so all the more seductive, all the better at convincing her that there was a plot to her life after all, a heroic journey that led to this very point. Oh, the feelings you'll have. Tomorrow the feeling would be jealousy, and she would berate herself for it, or joy that she would long to bottle and preserve. But for now, the sadness felt good. She kept breathing, and then this feeling too faded into the quiet. The less her mind held on to feelings or stray thoughts, whether of Claire's irritation with Jeanette, the caretaker, or the family history questions her daughter Liz kept asking, or why Peter, her son, had stayed away from this place for so very long, the less her mind possessed. And without possessions, what was there left to narrate? But still, the need for narrative remained, the urge in its raw form, stripped of content, to tell a story, any story, if only about the merest scrap of sensation. And yet, it turned out that even this habit was no more capable of life without sustenance than any other living thing. Unfed, it too starved, leaving in its absence, if only for a moment, peace.
It was great.
Yeah, I read that because it helps me calm down too.
It's no, you know what? It really. This is so. I just made this connection, and I think a very good one. But do you know Annie Baker's work at all? The playwright.
I've seen one or two plays, but
just like the world that you create in the Women's Center in Vermont feels to me like an Annie Baker play. You know, like she has a play called Circle Mirror Transformation that are about these lives of these people that come together in this kind of movement class kind of thing. And it's like transcendently kind of Chekhovian, and that it's like small lives observed, but like love and death and why are we here somehow enters the question. And I feel like I just felt that from that, which is really cool. I should tell her to read this. I don't know why I said that. Do you want to shift?
She used to teach at Hunter.
She did teach at Hunter, yeah, and she's an incredible writer. Can we shift to process stuff?
Sure, wherever you want to go.
Yesterday we talked at lunch about, what was the term? It was sort of method writing.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about theater and acting, and Adam mentioned this concept of method writing, which I think we both do in some way, but why don't you articulate what that is as best you can?
Well, I was just talking about, because I did, in high school and college, I did a bunch of acting, and I thought that when I got to college, I thought I was going to be a drama major and so on. And the way that I was taught was all sort of that method notion, right? Behave as if the given circumstances are real. And so when I am working on characters, when I'm writing, most of the day, I mean, the formal part of the day is you got to write sentences, but the sort of mental state I'm trying to get myself into it feels sort of like that. I'm trying to feel into the state that person's in, and that can bleed out into life, right? So Peter is this sort of dissociated character in the beginning of this, but for the first third of the book, he's very cut off from himself. That's a lot of what the book is about. And I, as my partner could probably attest, I was somewhat, it's difficult to shift those registers because I'm trying to inhabit it. And I think that's one of the reasons that I found acting kind of scary, is because I I thought, like, I'm getting into these emotions, I didn't know how to turn them off
Right.
when they were flowing. And in writing, that's what I'm trying to do. So I guess it's a sense of, I call it that because it's a way I was taught something else, but it's how I approach being inside a character.
There's a playwright I admire a lot named Stephen Allegirgus, and one time we were in a panel thing, and Stephen's really, really gruff and like just says what he thinks. I love this dude. And somebody said, what's the most important part of your process to him? And he's a former actor who has written all these amazing plays. He's won the Pulitzer and been on Broadway and all that stuff, as an actor and a writer. And he said naps. Naps are like the most important thing to me. And I was like, I was so happy to hear someone else say that, because I take a lot of naps. But I think that's actually like allowing your unconscious to kind of unravel and I always find, like, when I come to a place where I can't solve a problem in whatever I'm working on, I'm a basketball player, so I go shoot around for like 30 minutes, I get out of my head, that's like my meditation, or I take a nap, and it makes me look lazy, right? I know I look lazy, I didn't do the dishes, or I didn't clean my room, or my dog is like looking at me like, are you gonna take me outside? But I think it's like one of the most important things, and I'm so grateful to Stephen that he said that, but I think that's part of the method thing. For me, it's not so much like, I'm going to become the character. It's more like I get reduced to, like, I just can't focus on anything else. And I get reduced to, like, I become an absurd destroyer of my own life. Like the laundry metastasizes in the corner and my dog starts looking at me like, are we going to go outside? And I just kind of forget where I am, and I think that's undervalued, The entropy of that is undervalued, as, like, we should have writing camps where people just take naps and, like,
they do
don't
exist.
do their laundry, right?
They do exist.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, artist residencies can often function that
That's
way.
funny.
Yeah.
And
That's why they put day beds in studios at artist residencies.
do you, what can you describe for, I'm sure a lot of people out here are interested, what is your daily grind? Like, what is it when you're in the thick of it with with this book?
It's very routinized. I mean, it's like kind of, I meditate each morning, and I kind of lent that meditation in a sense to, like, give me an opportunity to write about that. But I write in the morning and then into the afternoon, and if I have lunch, then it's all over because my brain shuts down and I can't. I find that the editorial voices in my head starve before the rest of me does. So there's a sense in which I can.
So you fast. Almost.
Yeah, I fast. It's like a sort of like a light fasting, low blood sugar leads to sort of. It's actually true. I mean, the first hour or 2 hours of any given day is editing what I had wrote the day before, and the effort is always to find what is the. I mean, the job is always, for me, is like, I got to find a sentence that's in some rhythmic relationship to the last sentence. And so a paragraph to the last paragraph, kind of inching forward. And so and I'm pretty, that's all it is. I don't know.
And what is the extreme thing that, like, you can go to that pulls you out of it, that gives you relief, that, like, or do you just, like, stay in it as long as you can?
I mean, I feel like that's that question when you sometimes go to a doctor's office and it says, like, what are your hobbies? And I'm always like, I don't know. I don't think I have any. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I have hobbies. I stare out the window. I worry about things. I mean, I don't know what to do.
That's totally legit. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I don't know what breaks it. I mean, of course, it's pleasure when we're sort of making it all sound kind of dreary. I mean, that absorption is a great gift, right? And it's a great gift to have the privilege of the time to do it, and to be able to dwell in that, right? So, I mean, that's one of the things that's different. Like, musicians, I always think if they're performing, they're doing the art while they're on stage. The weird thing about doing book stuff is, like, my emotional relationship to the composition of the book ended a year ago.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And so it's not like I'm playing song. I can read, and but it's a different.
It's an artifact.
Yeah, it's right. It's right. And so that's That's different.
And then when you get all your remainder books sent to you, they become tombstones, artifacts, That's like I have a thing behind my garage upstate, and it's just like all my remainder books. And I go in there and I feel kind of bad, and then I do Stairmaster.
Hobbies.
That's what gets
Hobbies.
me going. Yeah, hobbies.
Yeah, right.
I put this on my phone because I want to read this, because I saw it in the elevator. I'm just going to read it from my phone, so I'm in a different kind of mode here. In the elevator earlier, I saw a Richard Ford quote that said, quote, "If loneliness is the disease, then the story is the cure." That in some ways relates to Peter, obviously, we've talked about that, but it also relates to process. Like, Peter is obsessed with the stories of these lives, of these characters who are struggling to find a home, footing, safety. And then we as writers, all the people here who are writers, we are faced with the blank page and the isolation of that act. I weirdly can write when the basketball game's on and people are having a banquet over here and my dog's playing fetch. I don't know why, but I can zero in. And I know so many other people who need the absolute space and like a monastic kind of four walls and a window.
Yeah.
In terms of that, here's the tough question. Do you find relief in completing this?
Yeah.
Do you find like this gives you, like the word I guess is apotheosis, does it give you, do you feel like you've marched the good march?
Cathartic.
Is it,
Yeah.
or do you feel like, oh God, I just left my intestines everywhere?
Right. Well, I mean, I think it is, I did think of it as a book about loneliness in a lot of ways. Why? Because I think there's a lot of shame involved in loneliness, and I experienced a lot of it, and obviously millions of people too. And it's hard to write about. It felt even to me like shameful to write about, which always seems to me like a good move towards things that you're scared of. And I'd written a lot about, in various forms, like gay teenagers, and there's some gay teenage stuff in here too, but and old people, but not as much about gay adults. And so I wanted to, I was conscious of that, and I don't know. I guess I sort of thought, like, who among us is not a sad gay boy? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's some sort of, I was trying to make of my, some of my own earlier life, some sort of universal thing. But the fact is that in this book, he's also then dealing with people. At one point, his boss says, remember, our clients are often lonely. They're people who've come from another country and are trying to make their way and don't have the connections that they would at home. And he's encountering people who are under a great deal of duress, but that's what he can focus on. There's a way in which in his life and his way he's put his world together, he can focus on those stories. Much like Anne can focus on the stories that she's much more emotionally integrated, as a therapist would say, but and has a more narrative kind of breadth. And so that's why I wrote her in the third person in the past tense, because she has this capacity, which Peter doesn't have. So he's first person present tense. But I wanted to dramatize what it was for someone to be more involved in other people's stories than their own. And I think that in some ways is an analogy for a writer, right? Like for an immigration lawyer, the consequences are far higher because someone is going to be deported. No one gets hurt if the novel is bad, right? But like if you spend all day thinking about other people, they might just be in your head, but then, therapists, ministers, anybody in the helping profession, social workers, teachers. So yeah, that was part of the kind of, I don't know, it's a word cloud of an answer, but it's like these things were all roving around that I wanted to get at them.
It reminded me just the kind of, not the hypocrisy, because that's a negative word, but Anne's ability to minister to other people, and yet she can't find the language or the impulse to like really, really, truly reach out to her son, which is an incredible blind spot or dichotomy that I find interesting. I did a play years ago, and Kurt Vonnegut was alive, and he came and saw it twice, and then he asked me to have dinner, and he was so taken with the play, and he was like, it was about this family that was falling apart in Chicago, and this kid goes on this quest, and then he performs seppuku. It's horrible. It's a crazy play called Stone Cold Dead Serious, but he was really drawn to the daughter in the play, and he couldn't stop talking about the daughter. And then about an hour into it, after he'd had like some drinks, and they let him smoke in the restaurant because he was Kurt Vonnegut, and I was just like starstruck the entire time. I asked him about I knew he had a daughter, and I said, "What about your daughter?" And he was like, I think she's driving around on Long Island, this old car that I have. We haven't talked in 12 years. And I was just like, here's a man who reached so many readers, so many teen readers, young adult readers, college-age readers, and yet could not find a way to reach his daughter. And I don't say this with any judgment of him. I still think he's one of the great artists who's ever lived. But I was really struck by that kind of blind spot and that kind of, and I love those kind of characters. Like I wanted to put Kurt Vonnegut in a play after that, and I feel like Anne and Peter both have this interesting interlocking, these blind spots that kind of keep, they go into the room and they can't see the room they're in, but they can feel the wallpaper over here, and I just think I love those kind of characters. So, what do I say? Kudos. I want to look at the time real fast because we have 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I have another question. It's going to be more fun, I think. Okay, here's what I wrote. Sex. You write really well about sex. Let's discuss you first.
All right. Well, sex. Okay, so
and violence.
Violence, yes. Actually, it was. I appreciated what we were talking about yesterday when there. Yeah, I guess let me see. What am I going to say about sex? I mean, one thing. Sex scenes are famously often terrible and bad, and people, you don't want to read them, but they are, of course, and I know there's a lot of sex, and you've put sex on stage in your plays in many ways, and there is a vulnerability, right? I mean, to state the obvious, it's like such a heightened level of vulnerability. And so whether the character recognizes that or not, or is trying to avoid it, it is a heightened level of vulnerability. And I did also, and this comes up at some point in the book, but at least maybe this is just my experience, there is like a kind of, can be an aggression in male sexual desire that is certainly like the hypermasculinism that can come in like gay culture and the fetishizing of like musculature and all that kind of thing. And there's like a kind of an aggression that it's not so, I think it's not just about sexuality, it's about gender in some ways. And it's also the scripts we have about how we're supposed to be, And also, as a teenager, like it's overwhelming, right? Like when you have like the hormonal kind of thing, it's just very intense. And so I wanted to, and yet you're trying to be a civil person, And so this is sounding too autobiographical. But I wanted to get at some of the complexity of male desire that he's both ashamed of and conflicted by and doesn't really know what to do with.
There's an amazing moment, I won't spoil it. and I won't even tell you what the frame of the moment is because I don't want to spoil it. But there's a sexual encounter between two characters, and it goes from being consensual to shameful to, it turns so quickly into so many different iterations of like aggression, ecstasy, shame, fear, and then ultimately like there is kind of something terrible that happens. And I was really struck by like how you accomplished all of that in like 4 sentences. You know, I think, you know, on stage, you know, and I've put sex in fiction too, but I don't, on stage, I don't think people are really that interested in looking at, although I do love the male body and the female body, and I think they're beautiful things to look at on stage if they're lit well, right? But I think the thing that the audience is actually interested in is what's going on in their eyes. You know, like the vulnerability that you speak of. At least in my experience of my work and some of my friends' work who work in the theater, I don't think it's really like about people like zoning in a kind of, you know,
pornographic way,
like with their phones on in a genital box. You know, I do think it's about human vulnerability and frailty, and I think when it's best accomplished, that's at the forefront, and like the kind of mysteries of what those turns are that I think you accomplished really well in that scene. That's the part that draws us in and is human. So that's just something I try to think about when I'm doing it. Not sex in my life, but sex on stage or in a book. But our time, look, it's 45 minutes. We were told we had 45 minutes to talk, and my Apple Watch just told me that. And now we're supposed to open it up. Am I doing the right thing here? Yeah? Okay, we're supposed to open it up to questions, and then someone's going to guide you as to how to accomplish that.
All right. I'm not sure where that person is.
John, so we're going to go around the microphone, so raise your hand if you have a question.
Oh, we've got a raised hand right here.
Hello, my name is Vale. I'm very excited to read your book. I have a perhaps silly question. You both spoke a bit about theater, and I'm wondering if your book were to be adapted into a jukebox musical, who would be the musical artist?
Jukebox musical. Wow.
Sorry to put you on the spot here.
That's a hard question. I feel like it would have to be different people for different characters. And just because I read it and it came to mind, I'm thinking to myself, like, Elliott Smith is not so far off for Peter in some ways, in terms of like maybe Elliott Smith's a little more theatrically depressed, but, and for her, I don't know. I feel like it would be like Bach or somebody. It would be like some very like, I mean, that's not a good jukebox thing, but.
Fair. I feel like a novel that seems to be perhaps motivated a lot by interiority would not lend itself to something as theatrical musical.
Well, but in any case, I appreciate the question.
Thank you for indulging me.
Yes. Oh, there's one behind you.
Hello, my name is Mike. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about your process. I noticed that you were JD Law.
Yeah.
So I assume you maybe were a lawyer or something, and then your transition to writing. I ask this because there might be others in the audience, but I myself have had a 20-year career in business, and in the last few years have started writing and doing it full time now and not working in business. And so sometimes I look out the window and I say, what am I doing here? And, you know, is this the right thing? So I just was wondering if you can share a little bit more of your journey.
Sure.
Thank you.
Doubt is something you've got to survive to write. And I think to write a whole book, you've got to survive like radical doubt. You've got to survive days and weeks when you think it's just worthless and not going to happen and not going to go anywhere and nobody wants to read it. So welcome, you know what I mean, to that endeavor. I mean, I think one of the things I like to sort of say to myself is just because I had a bad day or a bad week or a bad season doesn't mean that my work did. Right? Like the work is this, and my attitude towards it is like this. You know what I mean? So, and in terms, I was never a lawyer. One of my good friends who is a lawyer was laughing as you asked that question because he's like, he was never a lawyer. I was never a lawyer. I benefited from going to law school and having friends who were lawyers who I learned a lot from. But yeah, I knew I wouldn't like being a lawyer because I would have to work harder than I wanted to work. So yes, but I think the thing that's similar is that you only have words, right? If you're in like, lawyers have words to make briefs, authors have words to make, there's no special effects, there's no lighting, you know what I mean? It's all what you have on the page, so. Yeah. Oh, way up here in the front.
Thank you both for.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, thanks for being here.
It was exciting to read your book when immigration is like on the front page of the newspaper, and I was, amazed at artists, pick up things in the culture that are brewing, like before they explode on the front page. So it was, my question had to do with, Peter, it was very clear to me, his obsession, his focus on story is very he's like a figure in a different way for the novelist, but like trying to piece together a coherent narrative that will convince a legal authority. But in this and I hadn't really thought about Anne that way, but in the section that you read, story, her need for a narrative also came into play. Although she, in her work, she's really like the what the French would call l'écoute, like the receptor for other people. So can you talk about her need for story?
Yeah, I mean, that section that I just read, it really does come out of meditation, in which if you slow down enough, you just realize that almost every thought you have is part of a story. It's like, I look at the clock and it's part of a story. That's sort of an obvious one. But like, I look at the shoe and it's part of a story of when I bought the shoe. You know what I mean? There's like almost nothing that we don't try to metabolize as narrative, like at just a very basic level, you know? And so to stop doing that is to try to stop a very basic form of cognition, you know? And I think that's what, like, the kind of the Buddhist monks, you know what I mean? They are ceasing that activity. They're like not narrating anything at a certain point. I am not there, you know what I mean? But it is, I feel at least like I've experienced watching that urge to narrate always, every second. And so I wanted to get into that with her, and also that she talks about what she offers the women in this center is a fellowship of hospitality. And so she is cultivating a certain inner state in order then to be able to offer to other people the space to tell their own stories, right? Like she's sort of, in some ways, gotten rid of that urge to have it be about herself, and is able to listen as a result of that. But as we've been talking about, it's not so simple. And I think you can hide in meditation, right? Like people can use all kinds of contemplative practices as places to hide from things that you might need to face, you know? So that's a meandering answer, but yeah. That's part of what I was thinking about with her. Yes.
Adam, thank you. Nice to see you again.
Yes, good to see you.
This is a craft question, and I'll try and ask it without spoiling.
Yeah. Sounds like someone's read the book.
Moves around in places, New York, Brooklyn, Peter's hometown, Vermont, and it really moves around in time, back and forth. And how much of that as you're composing, do you have a sense of how that fits together? And then how much is in rewrite? And then how much does this editor do that you've both said is the best editor ever?
Yeah.
I'm just interested in how much of a sense you have of how that might fit together,
Yeah.
and how much does somebody have to help you?
Yeah. Well, you happen to be sitting next to the person who read the earliest draft of the book. So one of the answers is early readers. Amity Gage is here. We've read each other's work for years. And I think I'm always writing scenes. Like I always start with scenes, like everybody does. You've got something and you're interested in it, and then you start asking a series of questions, like why is this guy in the apartment on his own, and what is he doing, and I had an instinct that he was going to be estranged from his mother, so why, and what is his profession, and all the kind of things. And then I tend to work for quite a while, like a couple of years probably, before giving it to Amity, because, and then eventually to Ben, is that it's because if you give something too early, I already know their problems. You know what I mean? I know their problems. And so you don't want to, you want to keep that energy that you have that needs to fix those things. And then at some point where you lose a bit of perspective, that's when you need to give it to someone else. But in this book, in terms of the back and forth, the cutting back and forth, it wasn't until I started having Anne's point of view as part of the book that I realized it would be kind of a duet. So it took a while to learn that. Yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Oh.
This guy he'd had his hand up so many times.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, there's someone. Oh, yes. I know that suspect.
Adam, congratulations.
Thank you.
So I have a question about research.
Yeah.
How much research do you do for this? How important is veracity? Is it a pain for you to do a lot of research?
No, I mean, in this case, when it came to him being an immigration lawyer, veracity was very important to me. I think, as I said, I had some, mainly through friends who were immigration lawyers, sort of initial exposure. And the advantage of having gone to law school is at least I could read a legal decision and understand the language of it. But then it was going in and sitting in courts and, listening to how they do things. But it's like, I wrote in an earlier book about finance and banking. I never worked in finance or banking. But what I want to know as a writer is how do they use language? How do they describe what they're doing? And what are the habits of the lingo, the ways that they, use language as a weapon or as a defense or, because I'm not writing it as a manual, I'm not, it's accuracy isn't the highest, goal, but again, that sort of method thing, like if I'm trying to be inside the mind of an immigration lawyer, well, I want to know what that person's daily life is like. But that said, to answer the question more directly, I tend to be kind of I'm not someone who researches for a year and does everything and then sits down and writes. Some people work that way. I tend to be interested in something, start writing, and they'd be like, oh, I don't know this, and it can be inefficient because then you go and research and they're like, yeah, that's totally wrong. That's 80 pages you wrote, So you got to go back and fix those things. But so I'm more sort of iterative, it kind of goes, version after version. And then there are, there were lawyers that very generously agreed to read the book, not to protect me from libel, but to say whether or not I kind of got it, so that was very helpful.
What was your verdict? Did you get it?
I'd fixed whatever they told me to fix, you know what I mean? Someone was like, that's not how the statute works. I'm like, okay, thank you, I would have to have done that. But yeah, they were very generous with their time. So. I guess that's it. Yeah. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Terry.